That's it.
That's the red light.
There we are.
Okay.
So, today is Wednesday the 19th of July 2017, and this is part of the Theatre Oral History Project, and I'm Philip Smith.
And I'm Mina Seven.
And today we're chatting to...
Peter Bradshaw.
Who?
I worked at the Theatre Royal from 1974 to 1977 as assistant manager.
Excellent. And Peter, perhaps we could start off by, could you just tell us a bit about your background? Are you from Nottingham originally?
Yes, really up until 1977 I spent all my working time in Nottingham. In actual fact, I was born in a place called Plumtree, which is about 7 miles out of Nottingham. So for the majority of my working life I have worked in the city centre until latter years. But working for Moss Empires at that time, it was an absolute dream come true, really, because I remember this complex before it was as it is now. I remember with the Empire at the side and being taken to the Empire by my mother to see Ruby Murray. And as a child, I remember always in the gods, because I had 8 brothers and sisters, so we hadn't got a lot of money. So we sat in the gods, and what I was fascinated was her dress was changing colour, and I couldn't understand how she was managing to do it. Latter days, I know it was a follow spot on with a different coloured fursalloy going for. But as a child, it's just a wonderland, absolutely a wonderland to you. So those were my early days of this theatre. Yeah.
And so, did you maintain an interest as you were in the theatre as you were growing up?
I've always wanted to be in the entertainment business. I mean, latter days, I do walk on television occasionally, a film with Emily Watson last year. So I do enjoy it, I must admit. I do sing as well. So, but my granddaughter, whenever I sing, she says, "Grandpa, be quiet." But yes, coming to the Theatre Royal, it was like joining a family because you knew everybody, even down to the girls in the box office, because we weren't always open. We had weeks when it was dark. And of course, then if I was on the late shift, I'd get invited in and quite merrily left the box office because they get the bottle of sherry out. It's because we all knew each other, you know? And while the County Hotel was still adjoined to the theatre, the girls in the box office brought tea round, tea and cream cakes and whatever, by the doorman. And I think they made sure that he, on a Monday night when we used to have to dress the house up for some place and different things, would get tickets. Yeah, it was a wonderland. It absolutely was.
Was this your first job that you had working for the theatre?
For the theatre, yes. Up until then, I'd been at Griffin and Spalding's on the display department. So I was only just down the road, in actual fact.
Sorry, Debenhams now.
Debenhams
I'm
now,
not
yes.
From
Sorry, of course. Debenhams now.
So how did you come to work for the Theatre Royal then, from working?
Because the display manager's secretary knew the manager of the Theatre Royal, and she said, "You know, I know where there's a good job for you if you're interested." Of course, when she told me, I came over to see Leonard Claxton, because he'd been the assistant manager to Frank Matthey, who was a very old Moss Empire's theatre manager who had actually come from the Glasgow Empire, the death place for all artists. It's the only place that Des O'Connor went on stage and fainted on purpose so they could drag him off because he was frightened to death of the audience. Anyway, that's by the by. So yes, I came over to see Leonard, and I started, I think it was September 1974. I can even remember the first show that I was with was Patricia Phoenix, Alan Browning in Gaslight. That was my first show. And then after that, my office was part of the old Empire, overlooking the car park, which was at the back of the theatre, more or less facing the stage door. So every Monday I'd be at my office desk and you'd see the artists arriving and the big wagons with it. Oh, wonderful.
So, as I said, I've not got much connection with the theatre at all,
right.
To the workings of it. Can you explain what your job was when you started?
Front of house, cashing up the box office on 2 different shifts. All the paperwork, the invoices went through my office. I had a lady in there part-time doing the wages, because then of course you had to have insurance stamps. So she would make a list of insurance stamps. I would go to the post office and buy them, bring them back. She'd put them on the paperwork, the employment paperwork, and of course also doing the banking, taking it to the bank with a what you call cufflink round my wrist on this brown, which stood out like a sore thumb what I was carrying, but luckily nobody ever attacked me. So that was, and also making sure that the artists had got what they wanted in their dressing rooms, because the dressing rooms weren't particularly very good. In fact, at one time we had the Royal Ballet come here, which was a real coup for the Theatre Royal, and all the car park was full of porta cabins as dressing rooms, extra toilets, and the place came alive. It really did, because they'd be on the stage in the morning warming up, so everywhere you went there was something happening. Yeah, of course I'd lost my view of the stage door, but it didn't really make much difference. But yes, that was wonderful. And also, being a Moss Empire's theatre, we were on the rota of shows going round the Moss. It was like the old-time comedians. If you got an act and just did the Moss Empires, you could make that act last you for 2 or 3 years. Television was the downfall. Once you go out there and you tell them your jokes, they've got to have script writers and things like that. So yes, television was the downfall of theatres, unfortunately.
Did you work a shift pattern or?
Yes. If we were dark, I'd work 4 till when the box office closed, 9 by the time I cashed up 10 o'clock. So it was like on a road. You literally fitted in with everything, But of course, the busiest time was pantomime time. When you got, because in those days pantomimes ran for about 3 months. First pantomime I remember was Harry Worth and Anne Aston, and the Cox and Miles twins, who later on, the Cox twins were in the film Alice Through the Looking Glass. They were the Tweedledum and Tweedledee. You remember that film? With Dame Flora Robson was the Queen of Hearts. Yes, well they were Tweedledum and Tweedledee. Fabulous performers. But we did have a little bit of trouble with Anne Aston when she came. First of all, her boyfriend was her manager. He didn't like it because Harry's name was above her name on the front of the house. And he also didn't like it because her name wasn't as big as Harry's. But you have to remember, Anne Aston only got popularity through The Golden Shot with Bob Monkhouse, but this manager had delusions of grandeur, and he said she was the star, which is absolutely ridiculous. Harry was an old-time performer, and God bless Harry, at the end of the show, no matter what the pantomime was, he'd do his ventriloquist doll bit. It didn't fit into the pantomime, but he always did that. And I remember him coming off the stage one afternoon when I was in the wings watching. He said, "Just the sort of audience I like, Peter." I said, "What's that, Harry?" He said, "They'll laugh at anything." So, and of course then we used to have John Hanson coming with the musicals, Glamorous Nights, The Student Prince, Maid of the Mountains. Beautiful music that isn't written today. So I used to enjoy that. I remember one afternoon, it was Maid of the Mountains, and John Hanson was on stage on his own scene, When I'm Calling You, and the stage cat was following him around. But he didn't know. The audience were laughing, but this cat, everywhere he went, was right at the back of him. And he wasn't very happy when he found out. But yes, that was quite a day, that was. I think 1 or 2 heads nearly rolled because of that. But you can't blame the cat, can you?
If we're not laughing, Peter, it's not that we're not funny or funny, it's we don't want to interfere with you on the tape. So.
No, that's fine. And of course, we used to have staff. There was a lady called Maud Scattergood. Maud was the housekeeper. She literally did everything. She held the cleaners together. She also ran the Stalls bar. And I'll talk about Eric Dexter in a while, but Maud was very hard working, and of course all the ladies cleaners were all in the 70s, and when they had their coffee break they'd sit on the dress circle, and if you walked through the "Hello, how are you?" or very cheery lovely old ladies, lovely old ladies. In fact, I think the place ran on old people, to be honest with you, because all the doormen were obviously ex-military, and if you were walking towards them, they'd pull the door open. They almost saluted you as you walked through, but it was lovely. I don't know whether people have to wear dress suits anymore with black bow ties in the evening, do they? When the theatre
They have a uniform. They do have a uniform.
Oh, it's a uniform.
Yes.
We used to have a dinner suit on. But I remember having that dinner suit on and being up in the auditorium above the audience, above where the beautiful chandelier is, with a torch in one hand and a petrol can in the other, looking for leaks, because the roof just leaked like a sieve. And I just happened to look down the middle, you know, where the chandelier hangs. I don't like heights, but you could see the top of people's heads, and of course the show was going on, and there was me walking up and down in the roof looking to stop the rain going on them. Yeah, but of course that was the problem. Moss Empires in their heyday, wonderful. Stone Moss as it was, a wonderful organisation, but unfortunately in latter years they were taking money out of the theatres and not investing it back in the maintenance, unfortunately, and that's why the theatre was in such a state. You know, you've got some of the cherubs that got a leg missing or a head missing. I also remember Leslie Crowther standing on the stage at the end of the pantomime, and he was talking about what was going to happen to it. And he said, and I hope when the restoration is finished, the cherubs get their arms and heads back. Which did happen. I mean, Lennon Claxton and I, there were two boxes that were never ever used, right at the very top. So one was his box for his friends, and one was for my family. That we were allowed to come in if it wasn't particularly very, very busy. So, you know, and I'm sure all that sort of thing doesn't happen today. But it was like, you know, it was a family. So I've told you about Maud. Mm-hmm. She was in charge of the dressing room being clean, the whole theatre. Then Eric Dexter, he was in charge of the usherettes. There was a small confectionery kiosk in the foyer opposite the box office, and Eric would man that when the theatre, you know, as people were coming in and during the interval. But prior to him going back during the interval, he would organise the usherettes with their ice creams and making sure all the trays were full. And then after the interval, they would cash into Eric. And Eric would then cash all the money over to me. So that's how it worked. So that's Eric Dexter. Oh, and of course, in my day, we still had gas lights in the balcony, so we had to employ a fireman. The fireman we had was about 80. His name was Bill Keys. He'd stand there in a fireman's uniform with a peak cap and welcome people in. You know, people thought that he was part of the management. What a lovely man. What an absolutely lovely man. After the interval, you'd see him going across the road, probably shouldn't say this, to the pub. And he used to sometimes come back and he was staggering or whatever, and he'd have a pint in his hand for me, which I'd find outside my office door. But it usually was about a quarter because he spilt it as he walked over. You know, but what a lovely man, you know.
Can you tell us a bit more about the gaslighting?
Yes, the gaslighting was in the upper circle, because at one time all theatres were lit by gas or sodium arc, is it they used to use? Some sort of sodium. So yes, so by law we had to have on duty a fireman, just in case anything did go wrong. So that was Bill's job. And we also had to have a night watchman every night who had to sleep at the theatre. I'm sure they must have slept through most of it. So that was, you know, that was really the staff. I'm just trying to think if there was anything else.
You mentioned Mrs. Firth.
Oh, Elizabeth Firth. She'd been the secretary for Frank Matthew and also Lennon Claxton, and she knew everything. She never threw anything away. Many, many years ago, when I was about 11, I'd written to the theatre to see if I could play music during the interval, stupidly, because you don't really think about copyright when you're that age. And she actually had kept my letter from the age of 11. She said, "Peter, is this you?" And it was the letter, of course, made me feel embarrassed because of the spelling mistakes. So she never threw anything away at all. But she was a lovely lady, as long as you didn't cross if you were fine with her, and she was fine, but there wasn't anything she didn't know about the theatre. And of course, in those days, we used to have company managers that came with the show, and they would give me a breakdown of what wages, or what money they wanted to pay the wages out. And also Lord Grade, who was head of Moss Empires, put Dad's Army in for 3 weeks prior to the West End. Now, I had to phone Lord Grade at his club every night to tell him what the takings were on the day, what the show was like at night. I used to phone this number and someone would answer, "Hello," I'd say, "It's Peter from Theatre Royal Nottingham. Hold on," and it would be, "Hello, dear boy, how are you? How are we doing today? Are we taking a lot of money?" You know, a lovely old guy. I never met him, but I'd spoken to him quite often on the phone. He even sent me a Christmas card after. Yes, Lord Grade, yeah. And of course, I also met Andrew Lloyd Webber when he came here with Tim Rice. I think it was Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat that he came to watch. I think that was a Tim Rice show. But anyway, he came with him anyway. The two of them came together. Many people, Morecambe and Wise, what a lovely couple. I have been to 1 or 2 fish and chip parties in their dressing room with the chorus girls and one afterwards, which they would put on. Eric would sit in the corner with his pipe, smoking away, while Ernie was the one showing off. You know, Ernie wanted to be the centre of attention, unfortunately. He would never be, he couldn't do anything on his own, but together they were magic. But Eric could have survived on his own. In fact, Eric did want to finish years before he had his first heart attack, but he didn't want to leave Ernie because they'd been together since childhood. But really, his wife would say that if Eric could have taken notice and finished early, he'd probably be alive today. But again, he isn't the first one that I've known drop dead on stage. We had a farce here with Sid James, and he was jumping about all over the stage, but we had to put a chaise lounge in his dressing room because he needed to rest between shows. So that was organised, and I met him, I met his wife. So they left us, they've been with us for a week, and then about 2 weeks later he went to the Sunderland Empire, and he's doing the show, and he just has a massive heart attack, holding his chest, falling on the settee on the stage, before anybody realised that he was having a heart attack. And poor old Sid James passed away on stage. But again, that's how many of them would like. Tommy Cooper even, at the Palladium. So, you know, a lot of people did work themselves into the ground. Sorry.
I was going to say, looking back at all the shows and the shows that you've seen here, which ones stand out in your mind, do you think, would you say, the most, and why?
Well, I was always a big fan of Stephen Grappelli, and he came to the Royal Centre and he was absolutely fantastic. Bob Hope as well. What a lovely man. We were told that when Bob came there'd be idiot cards all over, prompts and whatever. Nothing. When he walked out on stage, he stood at the microphone, they were clapping, going crazy, and he said, "Well, I may as well enjoy this now because it's more than I'll get at the end." But he was perfect, his timing was spot on, absolutely spot on. Yeah, Bob Hope, what a love. But you found the real stars were interesting and well-mannered people. It was the modern groups that used to come that thought there was somebody and expected you to bow and scrape to them. I mean, Diana Ross, what a star on stage. But I was called down to her dressing room and I knocked on the door, she opened and she got a box of tissues and she said, "What do you call these?" I said, "Tissues." "I didn't want boots, I want Kleenex," and she threw them at me down the corridor. I thought, well, have you little tantrum, dear. And I went back to the front of the theatre. But on stage, magic. And at the end, she shook my hand, she said, "Thank you, you've been lovely." Oh, great, what the Americans say. Yeah.
That was the other thing, next thing I was going to ask you actually, as well as, you know, you mentioned Diana Ross having that. Was there anything else you can talk about in terms of people who didn't quite match their public persona?
I know Freddie Starr was an absolute nightmare. He would do things to the other artists we had a trio on, and I can't remember what they were called, but one of the girls there was one boy and two girls. One of the girls was the daughter of Bruce Forsyth, and the show was going on, and he walked from the side, the wings, Freddie Starr, while they were singing, put his hand between the legs of the male, went cuckoo, and then walked back off again. Didn't go down very well.
Guys and Dolls.
Yes.
That was the group they were in.
I'm sure it was, yes. And silly little things like that, or you urinate in a guitar that belonged to somebody else. You know, whether it was whatever it was on at the time that made him like that. But again, what a star.
Not all merry people, are they?
No, not. To be honest, to be a real star, I think you have to not be a full shilling, to be honest with you. and how sad most of them were, you know, when they were on the stage, they got the audience with them, but most of them went back to a cold, well not cold, but only a hotel room, you know, so it wasn't easy for them, it really wasn't.
Are you okay talking, because we can stop and give you a rest?
Yeah, just stop for a few minutes.